All right, hey everybody. We just got done with our development call. This is the call that we do every week for our company nationally, where all of our people come together, and it's just a great time to come together as a community. Now, a lot of things were talked about and discussed in that call, and yet there were some specific things that, man, they resonated with me, and I thought that they might resonate with some people who are watching this video too. So if you've got nothing else to do, hang out with me for a while. But here's the real deal, guys. I was talking to one of my business partners, Jeff Reyes, and he reminded me of a book that I'd read years ago, and I hadn't read since. And I'm sure a lot of you have read it. The book is called Who Moved My Cheese? And there were a couple things that stood out in that book that directly relate to what's going on today. And then I also had the privilege of being on a training with John Maxwell, and I took some, extensive notes on that training as well. So my intention in this video is just to share some of those with you and kind of my take, what I've been thinking, what I've been processing, and I hope that it impacts some of you. So let's just jump into it. From Who Moved My Cheese? Now, if you don't know the book, if you haven't read it, I can't encourage you enough to get a copy of that book and read it. I'll post a link in the comments down below once this video is done being recorded and broadcast, where you can get a copy if you choose to. But the book is simply about how do we handle change. Now, understand that people either handle change or they don't handle change, but there's no in between. People always default one or the other, and most people hate change. They despise it. They'll do everything they can to avoid change. Yet change is inevitable, and we can't stop that, right? So a couple of takeaways from that book that I wrote down. I'm going to unpack this with you. The first thing that stood out to me in this book, Who Moved My Cheese, that I think is extremely relevant to what we're doing today in all of the world, like what we're all dealing with. First one is this: old ways of thinking will lead to extinction. Old ways of thinking will lead to extinction, meaning that if you're still caught up in the way it was, and you're still romanticizing about the way it was, and you're still holding on to the way it was, you're at risk of becoming extinct in your business, in your relationships, in lots of different ways. Because the bottom line is the game has changed. And that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Change is inevitable. Change is also powerful. But it all comes down to the perspective with which we choose to look at that change. So holding on to old ways of thinking lead to extinction. Now here's what I can see. And in conversations with agents across the country, both inside my company and out, here's what's interesting to me. I want you to remember that necessity is the mother. It's the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. And so this old ways of thinking, like those who are leaning into this change and who are embracing it for what it is, because we can't control it anyway. But those who are absolutely leaning into that change and they're embracing that change, guys, what I'm seeing that excites me is companies are innovating like they haven't in a long time. Companies are doing things that they wouldn't otherwise have done. And my bet is that on the outside edge of this, when the things go back to normal or the new normal, my bet is that we're all better for it. The companies that do that, that lean into it and are embracing this change and this opportunity, they're better for it because we're doing things that we probably otherwise wouldn't have if not for being necessary. Change can be a good thing. Here's the next one. Don't overanalyze and overcomplicate things. It's really easy right now, especially if you're like me and you're working from home. I'm working out of my son's room right now, right? I'm working from home because this just is what it is, because we're told to be at home right now, and that's okay. It's really tempting right now where we have more time on our hands and information is more readily available to us now than it ever has been in history. It's very tempting to overanalyze the situation. If you haven't yet noticed, the news media is not putting out anything new about the virus. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, this is not a political statement, but all of the news media runs out of things to say after about the first hour of the day. And so then they just regurgitate the same stuff all day long. And they look to sensationalize what they're putting out because their objective is to get eyeballs and views. Not good or bad, it just is. But we know that going into it. So we need to avoid overanalyzing and overcomplicating. We need to be aware. We need to be informed. Absolutely, that's important. And you should be able to do that in about 30 minutes to 45 minutes a day. The rest of the day, just stop watching. Stop looking at it. It's not going to change anything anyway. Be informed. Don't overanalyze. Here's the next one. This is a big one, guys. This resonated with a lot of people on the call today. Go past fear and enjoy the journey. Go past fear and enjoy the journey. Here's what we know. There's a lot of people right now. If you guys are talking, I'm talking to people every day, lots of people every day in this environment, this setting, right? This is my life right now. And that's cool. But I'm seeing one of two people. I'm seeing the person who is absolutely consumed in the what if, the fear, which fear we know is an acronym for false evidence appearing real. They're consumed in fear, the unknown, the uncertainty, the what ifs. They're just living in that. They're marinating in that. And as a result, their days are not that great. The outlook's grim. Life's not that good right now for those people. Yet on the flip side of that, I talk to just as many people who have said, you know what, it is what it is. We are here. I didn't get us here. I also can't change the course from here. All I can do is lean into this, embrace the fact that this is reality, and I can look for the opportunity moving forward. So moving past fear to enjoy the journey, being grateful and being present in the current circumstances. I can't change it anyway. So I might as well look for the blessings in the day. I might as well embrace and be good with the journey, because as long as I do that, I'm convinced that we're all going to get through this okay. And we're likely, a lot of us, those that choose that path, are going to come out of this stronger and better than we were before. Think about how many relationships, if done properly, if you're embracing the journey, think about how many relationships are going to be stronger as a result of this. Think about how many families are going to be drawn closer together as a result of this. Guys, there's a lot of good that comes from terrible situations like this. It all comes down to the perspective we choose to look through. Lastly, on Who Moved My Cheese is this. Let go of old behavior instead of letting go of the situation. So what I told him this morning is, we need to let go of our old behavior, not let go of the situation. This is not a throw our hands up and say, Jesus, take the wheel and do nothing, because doing anything is better than doing nothing right now. All right? It doesn't matter what business you're in, what industry you're in, what relationships you are in or out of. It does not matter. This is not a time just to say, I'm a victim and I'm doing nothing. It's also not a time to hold on to the way it was in old behavior patterns, because they're just not going to be effective right now. And the sooner we get to terms with that, the better we're all going to be. Now, on Maxwell's Training, he said a couple things. I'm going to wrap this soon, so stick with me. But I loved what he said. A couple of these things really, really resonated with me. He said this, and I wrote this down on my notes here. You might choose to do the same thing. It said this. It said, crisis exaggerates or magnifies both positives and negatives. I'll say that again. Crisis exaggerates both positives and negatives. You see, we all have the tendency when we're in the midst of tough times to say, oh, it's worse than it's ever been. It's worse than it's absolutely ever been. Or in good times, it's the best that it's ever been. And if we had an objective person looking into the situation, they'd tell us it's just not true. Like if we look over the course of history, this is not the worst things have ever been. But there's a lot of people who are living like it is. Right? So crisis exaggerates or magnifies both positives and negatives. Again, it comes back to personal choice. I can't control 90% of what's happening right now. But my choice in that, I can control. Here's the next thing he said. How we view things determines how we do things. How we view things determines how we do things. And I think that is just what we talked about just now. How the choice we make, how we choose to take what's happening in front of us and move forward with it, that's going to determine how we do things, how we show up to those around us, how we project to everyone in our community and those in our family and everyone around us. How we view things is how we do things. And he brought up Solomon. Now, whether you're a believer or not is irrelevant. Solomon was a real guy, right? And Solomon was noted as the wisest man that's ever lived. And Solomon is famous for saying, this too shall pass. And Maxwell shared that with us. He said, this too shall pass. He said, but remember, that cuts both ways. This too shall pass means in the bad times, yes, this too shall pass. It will get better. Yet it also shows up in the good times that it's not going to be good and perfect forever. This too shall pass. So again, it goes back to embracing the journey, being fully present in the moment, and taking everything we can and moving forward. Choosing, purposely making the decision to choose and embrace what we can control, which is our attitude, our mindset, and our perspective, and just absolutely enjoying the journey, because you're not changing the course of the trajectory. We don't have that much power and control. Another thing that I thought was interesting, he gave us 5 comments on crisis. He said this. He said, first, a crisis is quite common. And he gave a historical perspective. I'm not going to go into it here, but how many terrible things have happened over the course of history, right? Crisis happens, unfortunately. It happens every year or every couple of years. Unfortunately, there's always a crisis. So don't lose sight of the fact and think that this is the crisis of all crises. It's serious. It's not great. Don't get me wrong. It's not a good thing. Not trying to play it lightly, but at the same time, we need to give it proper perspective. The second thing about crisis is a crisis is distracting. And he said this, he said, distractions draw us away from our goals, yet action and traction, which is the opposite of distraction, traction draws us towards them. So right now, we're seeing very clearly, at least in my business, we're seeing those who are taking advantage of this and leaning in and embracing it is what it is and doing what we can in the moment, being absolutely present in the moment and appropriate in the moment and just doing what we can to move forward. Those people are being drawn towards their goals and towards helping people around them, and other people are being drawn backwards because they're being distracted by a crisis. Again, we're going to see that gap get even wider in our estimation. The next one he said, third, a crisis reveals what is inside of us. So in the middle of a crisis reveals what's simply already inside of us. Right, so some people you're seeing freak out and the sky is falling. No judgment in any of this, by the way. If that's you, I love you still. It doesn't matter to me. But my point is, a crisis reveals what is already inside of us. People are responding and reacting the way they are because that's what was inside of them already. It didn't just show up with this tough time or this crisis. He said this, he said, crisis doesn't make us, it simply reveals us. Choices make us. Crisis reveals us. So again, it comes down to choice, and that's one of the only things that we have control over in all this is the choices that we make. Number 4, he said, a crisis requires adaptability. A crisis requires adaptability. And guys, this is so true right now more than I've ever seen in business. Not that I'm an expert or been around forever, but adaptability is key. Being nimble, being agile, not getting sucked into the mindset of woe is me and there's nothing I can do about this, not throwing up your hands and saying, Jesus, take the wheel. But what can I do? Like there's 10,000 things that won't work. There's 10,000 things that you can't do. And that's true at every crisis. The people who are going to get through this and be stronger as a result of going through it, they're focused on what can I do? What can we do? It's easy to come up with a list of things we can't do. What can I do or what can we do? And the fifth thing, a crisis is the time when real leaders show up. A crisis is the time when real leaders show up. Now, guys, I don't have all the answers to this, and I never, ever will claim to. I think it's absolutely bizarre. It's unprecedented. It's serious. It's affecting lots of people and lives and families across the country. I agree with all that. And at the same time, all of us are leaders. Whether you lead your family or a business or a team or a group, it does not much matter. You're all a leader. We're all leaders. And in crisis, we see leaders step up. As my business partner Cody says, this is the time when we need to step up, suit up, and show up. So guys, that's what's on my mind today. I don't know if any of that helped you. If it did, drop a comment down below. Let me know what your takeaway was. But this is an incredible opportunity for those who choose to take the appropriate perspective. Hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you're all staying safe. If there's anything I can do for you or our company can do for you to help you, we're here to be a resource, and we're going to get through this, and we're all going to be better as a result of this, depending upon the choices we make. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you next week.